This video is to help you do your off report or off schedule notes. So as a math lab tutor, doing all of this online tutoring without doing appointments, you're going to have a lot more of these off schedule notes. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to go into this little form here. It's going to be under your name and it's going to say add a new off schedule client report form. And this is going to help us keep track of our numbers, so that's why these notes are so important. And what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to enter your client. So we're going to go ahead and enter Jimmy Rader. He's a big fan of both the Math Lab and the Academic Success Center. So, and we're just going to pretend for a minute that I worked with Jimmy Rader this morning at 9 o'clock. And we're going to pretend like he was in the room or in our Zoom session room for maybe, I don't know, half an hour or so. And basically, and just do like a rough time of how long Jimmy Rader was in there. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just gives us a good idea of who's coming in when, since we no longer can have students sign into AccuTrack when they're online. And then I'm going to select my resource. So in this particular case, they worked with me. Professor McAllister has said that no one has to worry about doing assignments or doing notes. So you can just put in NA for both of those. The only reason that we have those is because the Academic Success Center does need to use them, and we have to have the same client report form for both areas because we're using the same system. So for those categories, you can just put NA. For the instructor, you're just going to list the instructor that is working with the student. So we'll pretend it was Professor Mizell, and whatever class they happen to be in. So we'll pretend it was intermediate algebra. And then you're just going to list whether they were Math Lab or ASE. And since you work in the Math Lab, and when you're getting paid from the Math Lab, you're always going to put the Math Lab. For those of you who maybe work in the ASE and the Math Lab, you're just going to mark the time based on when you're working. And then you'll just go ahead and press Save the Report. And that is all you have to do. And that will record all of that information on your appointment with Jimmy Rader in the system, so that Professor McAllister and I can kind of keep track of who's coming for the Math Lab and who's not coming. Now, let's say that, for instance, you had an appointment with Jimmy Rader and it was an actual appointment. And he came in and he decided that he wanted to have a session. So I'm just going to create this appointment with Kurt real quick so we can see this. In order to enter that note, all you have to do is click Add New. So if you are still on the schedule for appointments for whatever reason, it's going to look like this. The only thing you're not going to have to do is add your client. But same thing, you can put your NA for the information, and you would just go through the same process that we just. The other thing to keep in mind is that sometimes you're going to run into a student who is not registered. So if Jimmy Rader happens to come in and visit you, but he hasn't been registered yet, no big deal. All you have to do is, if you look underneath the name, your name there, there's a little head there with a little plus sign, teeny tiny little plus sign in there. And that's to create a new client. So what you'll do is you'll just put Jimmy Rader's email address in there. And you'll add his information. Make sure that you get the student ID number, because this is how we keep track of people. If you don't get a student ID number from a student, then make sure that you let Professor McAllister or myself know, and then we can look it up. And then normally I just give them a generic password like tutor12345. And what that does is that gives them an appointment. This is really not as important. It's just important that they have an account so that we can keep track of the information. So as long as, and you don't necessarily need to notify the client or anything, and then you'll just click on create your account and you'll be good to go. So that's how you would enter your notes, and you would register a student if they haven't been registered yet in the WCOnline. Okay.